Hello and welcome to Daddy Daughter Fodder,
where conversation meets culture.
So we're going to jump right into something today. So this is probably a few days ago by the time you're seeing this episode. So the infamous Hillary Clinton was on the news. Shrillery Clinton was on the news, and she said something. She talked about the formal deprogramming of the cult-like Trump supporters. And you've probably heard this. She said, I'll just try to give you some quotes and not to butcher it too bad. She said, I'm calling for a formal deprogramming of the Trump supporters. She called them a cult. She said that people who were members of this particular cult and who supported Trump were bigots. In fact, she said this. She said maybe they don't like migrants. Maybe they don't like gay people or black people, or maybe they don't like women who got their promotion at work. Ouch.
That was painful.
Ouch. Wow. What do you think about this particular tactic?
I think a lot of people first thought is going to be, wow, they're going to put us in concentration camps. Okay, calm down. We got a minute.
Who's they, first of all?
We got a minute. I think that's what you said, actually.
So this is a tactic of firming up your base. So it looks like, if I had my guess, she's trying to throw her hat back in the ring to run for president.
Well, I was actually listening to something last night, and they were talking about how, at what point does hate speech need to be 100% censored? Because when did people get the idea? Every bad thing that happened in history started with an idea, or just talking about it. Because then when you talk about it, then it manifests and it starts all these different things. And so we should stop talking about, negative things and communities in negative ways, so that we don't promote hate speech. I think that Hillary could learn a thing or two from the liberal that was touting that. I found that last night.
So what we're talking about is policing thought.
Yes.
Now think about how far of a stretch it is from the freedom of speech. Okay, so we're seeing an assault against the freedom of speech. And I think Hillary should be able to say these horrible, deplorable things and call names, which is what people refer to or result to when they don't have a competent argument or platform. But it's a far cry from freedom of speech to thought policing. Mm-hmm. So, what do you think about the idea that because you don't think how somebody else thinks that you should think, that you should be reprogrammed? What is that?
Well, what do you want me to say? Do you want me to come up with this deep philosophical answer other than that's like really crazy? Like anyone with two brain cells can like look at that and go, that's actually like really crazy.
Okay, well, hang on. Well, what about in areas where you have criminals who are serial killers? Mm-hmm. And do you think that they need to be reprogrammed?
Like they're thinking, because that's like not okay.
Right.
I think, definitely time and place for that type of a deal.
Okay, so
that's not it.
So how far is it a leap from a general consensus of a serial killer being reprogrammed to these people who are, gay hating, xenophobe, racist, people.
Not all the buzzwords.
Yeah. So
buzzword
you
salad.
see. So when we think about putting people in prison, or we think about reprogramming them, we're not talking about punishment. We're talking about re-indoctrinating them. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, what happens when a government begins to decide and say, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, what happens when the government says that this form of thought is okay, this form of thought is not okay, this form of speech is okay, this form of speech is not okay? What does that look like in our era and in the context of freedom of speech?
That's like not good, not it. Like, I don't know. Honestly, whenever people start talking about policing freedom of speech, I think oftentimes it's more of just to freak people out, because I don't actually think that it's going to be that bad. But at the same time, I feel like the more we get, the more sensitive we get in our culture, the more people look at things and go, wow, this is actually really, really bad. The more common things like that are going to be. So when we talk about... how
about the more divided we become in a culture?
Right. Kind of like that idea, but it's just everybody's feelings is not everybody's responsibility. And we need to stop pretending like we can make the world a safe, happy place, because let's be honest, the world's never going to be this safe, happy place. And so I feel like we're chasing this utopia of an idea of everything has got to be perfect 100% of the time or it's horrible. And That's just so not true, because we live in such a diverse nation, a diverse country, and what somebody thinks is this perfect utopia where nobody says any mean things, where nobody does anything outside of the box, nobody draws outside of the lines. So what do you want, a community or a community full of robots?
Well, but take Hitler, for example. Hitler began to
you were trying to get this video banned.
He began to speak very inflammatory, and he began to say things. He began to talk about the superiority of...
Sweeping, emphatic statements.
He did, and he inflamed the people. And the interesting thing was that two other countries, at least in the onset, adopted his same mentality towards the superiority of their particular people, and it was going to be a worldwide effort. But that freedom of speech that allowed him to do so, is that okay?
Well, Hitler was also won Man of the Year. Like, I feel like we always forget that Hitler was a very well-liked person before he became a very not well-liked person. So I think it has less to do with like speech and more of, not everyone is a Hitler. Does that make sense? Not everyone has the capability to have the charisma and all of that to be a Hitler. I feel like that was a very uncommon, very, very uncommon thing. But like, I understand what you're saying. 100% understand what you're saying. But what I'm saying is I feel like it's very unlikely to.
Well, but you got to follow me to the point, because I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that it wasn't the free speech that Hitler had.
Right.
It was the lack of free speech that he took away to
from
opposing voices.
Yeah.
The other voices
which is what's happening in like Russia and China and North Korea and now America.
Well, there's this moral culture of political correctness that takes away any voice that's opposed. Now, on the onset, you see it in the area of climate change, and you may say, "Hey, look, you believe in climate change. We're going to do a show on that. It's okay. We'll talk about climate change. Mm-hmm. Climate change is real. There is climate, and it does change. It's always has. But my point is, there's a certain general consensus, just as there was with Hitler. Freedom of speech is incredibly important, but it must be something that is unilateral. It must be something that is
not just one side of freedom.
That is across the board. But what happens is when one entity, one power, one representative has the representation and the voice, that's when it becomes very, very dangerous. So all of a sudden, there were opposing voices in Hitler's time, and they were forced underground. Mm-hmm. That's why America, and people make this mistake all the time. When we talk about America, America is not a democracy.
It's not.
America is a republic. It's actually a constitutional republic. Now, it does have representatives and some other things before you start sending me dirty emails and comments, but you might want to Google that before you argue with the statement.
My professor in my writing for the media class is always like, we have the most interesting field of work because we're protected by the First Amendment, and when you don't protect this, we lose democracy. And I had to bite my tongue so hard in class because I was like, we're not a democracy. But
there are democratic elements to it.
There really are, but
so free speech is important.
It is.
Can the throttling of free speech. Now, I want to jump into something else. I want to jump into what we refer to as the mainstream media, because when we talk about climate change, or we talk about abortion, or we talk about any of these hot topics, very often when the majority voice is not adequately or accurately represented, it is a throttling of free speech, and it does have influence or impact on society. And what we're seeing is a media, for the most part. There's been some, thank you, Jesus, for social media and some other outlets, but they are minuscule in comparison to the influence that MSNBC, CBS, ABC, all of these, organizations that have been around forever, they're really good at it. You do not hear the pro-life side on any of those particular media outlets.
Like a recent event, about like the fires in Maui, what you didn't hear?
What's that?
You never heard them interview the family of any parents that were looking for any children. You never heard about how the government had ordered them to block off highways and routes for people to escape. You never heard any of that stuff. You never heard any of the things that was actually happening because everything was underneath such a almost blanket of a media, because nobody talked about it. All they talked about was really ambiguous.
The narrative, and somehow you'll see these running themes of connecting climate change to it. You'll see these running themes of sexual immorality being connected to it. So I'm not going to call it the mainstream media. I think I'm going to call it the anti-Christian media.
The lamestream media.
Because it seems that every area where common sense or morality applies, that the mainstream media is on the other side of it. I just want there to be competition in the arena of ideas. And that's what free speech is about. If we can sit down and have a dialogue, but when you resort to what Hillary has done here, which is calling names and classifying tens of millions of people, why do they do that? And I think this is kind of the spirit that is overwhelming our nation. It's a spirit of kind of divide and conquer. The idea that we are divided by our race, we're divided by our sex, we're divided by our opinions on whether people should come to America legally or illegally. We discussed that on another episode. I would encourage you to take a look at that. But this division happens when free speech is throttled.
Yeah, it always happens. And I think I've said this before a couple times, but I don't necessarily want you to think like me. I just want you to think genuinely, whenever I go on my daily blocking spree, where I open up my TikTok and I see all of the millions of people that like are saying the dumbest things ever in no regards to what I'm talking about, but only spewing insults. I go, wow, I wish that we could have had a genuine conversation instead of you just resorting to acting like a 4-year-old.
This happened on one of the shorts from one of the episodes that I posted. Yeah. And what it comes down to is when you start calling names.
Oh my gosh.
Your free speech on my channel no longer exists. I mean, I don't mind talking ideas. Let's have a discussion, because I'll be honest with you, when it comes to abortion and speaking of that, shameless plug time.
40 Days for Life, people.
We are pro-life. Mm-hmm. God is pro-life. He is like, thou shalt not kill. We're good with that. Mm-hmm. I'm pro-life because this is the life that I was pro. Daddy, daughter, father. This is my wonderful daughter. Yes, and if I would have killed that clump of cells, it would mean that this clump of cells here, just the bigger version, wouldn't exist. So I got to touch on this real quick in the context of this. And I know we jumped topics really quick. But
whiplash.
You were always a human.
Always. I was never not a human.
You were never not a human.
I mean, I wasn't a zebra.
You were always a human.
Wow.
Yeah, but some people would argue, but you're a fetus.
I love that we always add like something into these episodes.
So there is freedom of speech, but there is not freedom of consequences from speech or thought. They will affect your life. So we're asking you to get your thinking right and get your talking right in such a way that it will benefit those around you. And we hope you've benefited from this show and look forward to future episodes. Final word?
Goodbye.
All right. We'll see you later.